Negative habits, anxiety, and intrusive thoughts. Many of us have been struggling with one or more of these things, especially in the last few years. Well, today's guest on the Thin Thinking podcast sees them all as the same thing. Dr. Amy Johnson takes a different approach to these things because she sees all three are essentially the same. They are just all our relationship with and understanding of thought. Interesting, right? Well, come on in and learn more on the 77th episode of the Thin Thinking podcast. Did you know that our struggle with weight doesn't start with the food on your plate or get fixed in the gym? 80% of our weight struggle is mental. That's right. The key to unlocking long-term weight release and management begins in your mind. Hi there, I'm Rita Black. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, weight loss expert, best-selling author, and the creator of the Shift Weight Mastery process. And not only have I helped thousands of people over the past 20 years achieve long-term weight mastery, I am also a former weight struggler, carb addict, and binge eater. And after 2 decades of failed diets and fad weight loss programs, I lost 40 pounds with the help of hypnosis. Not only did I release all that weight, I have kept it off for 25 years. Enter the Thin Thinking podcast, where you too will learn how to remove the mental roadblocks that keep you struggling. I'll give you the thin thinking tools, skills, and insights to help you develop the mindset you need, not only to achieve your ideal weight, but to stay there long term and live your best life. Come on in, my friends, and a shout out to our global Thin Thinking community. I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge you all for tuning in over this last now year and a half that we've been going at the Thin Thinking. So hello to all of you in Finland, in Paraguay, and Israel, and India, and all our friends all over the world. I appreciate you and the time we spend together every week. And speaking of that, I want your ideas for episodes. So talk to me. I would love to turn some of your thin thinking questions or concerns or challenges into upcoming episodes. So please find the questions link in the show notes of this episode and ask away. We want to hear from you. So now let's dive into today's episode, my interview with the amazing and insightful Dr. Amy Johnson. Dr. Amy Johnson is a psychologist, coach, author, and speaker who shares a groundbreaking new approach that helps people find lasting freedom from unwanted habits, anxiety, and self-doubt via insight rather than willpower. She is the author of Being Human, The Little Book of Big Change, The No Willpower Approach to Breaking Any Habit, and Just a Thought, a no willpower approach to end self-doubt and make peace with your mind. In 2017, she opened the Little School of Big Change, an online school that has helped thousands of people find freedom from anxiety and habits and live a more peaceful life. Amy also shares the no willpower approach in her top-rated podcast, Changeable, and she has trained over 70 coaches in her Change Coach training program. She has been a regularly featured expert on The Steve Harvey Show and Oprah.com, as well as in the Wall Street Journal and Self magazine. Well, hello, Amy, and welcome to the Thin Thinking podcast. I'm really excited to have you on here today. I look forward to hearing about your approach to anxiety and habits and intrusive thoughts. How did you get interested? I'm really curious about what brought you into wanting to help people in this way.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. It's odd actually. I was a very weird kid. I was hiding in my bed when I was like 8 and 10 years old under the covers with my mom's Wayne Dyer books and Marianne Williamson and all the like self-help and spirituality and stuff that was big in those days that she was reading. So really from a really early age, and I think it just came from kind of being a little bit of an anxious kid myself and seeing and feeling a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry from the adults around me. I
Mm.
was just so fascinated and like, why are they so stressed out all the time? Like this doesn't feel like it should be happening. They have a nice life. Like just relax, go play, you know? And yet the adults around me had a lot of conflict and they talked worried about money all the time. And I just remember my little kid head was like, why? You know, chill out. And then I started to pick up on many of those habits. And I did have a lot of
Mm.
anxiety as a child, into my teen years and into my early adult years. Kind of coming to a head when I was in graduate school, where I was having lots and lots of panic attacks and really was kind of agoraphobic for a bit there. I got some support, and that seemed to go much better. But then it sort of my worry and my little OCD tendencies tended to kind of move over into food related things, and so I struggled
Mm.
with an eating disorder off and on for about 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and I see that, and we can talk about this. It's all the same. It's all that same busy mind. But it took those different forms as
Yeah.
panic attacks and anxiety and eating issues. So, yeah, I knew from the time I was little, and that was just confirmed the whole way through that I want to understand how people work.
Wow. And then so you dove into that, you studied uh and then how did you cultivate your modality, the way that you work with people? How did that come about?
Yeah, well, it definitely was an evolution that I think probably hasn't, I hope hasn't ended, that we're still in. But yeah, so I studied psychology, and I kind of did the traditional route for a while and sort of realized somewhere in graduate school that kind of looking at people as sort of diseased or disordered just didn't resonate with me. It did,
Mm.
and I was starting to hear, and like I said, even as a kid, I kind of had the flip side of like this approach that's like, hey, we're innately healthy, like we have so much going for us, and yet we're just thinking a lot, and we confuse our thoughts with who we are. So that side, not the traditional psychology side, but the kind of more spiritual side, really resonated with me more. So when I left graduate school with my degree, I went more in the direction of coaching.
Okay.
And even my coaching has changed a lot. So I used to coach more around the content of people's thinking and, reframing thoughts and doing things with feelings and a lot of that stuff that we do. And now it's really evolved into into kind of more of like seeing just the fact that that thought is always happening and
Hmm.
that we live, not what we're thinking so much, because what we're thinking is all over the place. Who knows?
Right.
It's different by the day and different by the mood. And, it just doesn't feel that important to dive into the what of thinking, but to see the that of thinking,
The
that
thinking.
we're always thinking. And so, um, for myself as well, I'm doing this as a career all along, but I was also, as I mentioned, kind of still had some eating issues and some stuff. And for me, I had a lot of insights that allowed my bulimia to really go away very, very easily and quickly. And then that kind of became the essence, and it's much of what I share today. Some of the things I saw that became how I helped other people.
Oh, well, cool. So just so you guys all know that Amy is an expert in helping people find freedom from anxiety, intrusive thinking, and habits. So that's a big mouthful. Those are three big, what we would typically see as separate entities in a way: habits, intrusive thoughts, anxiety. So, but you kind of see it all as one. So, can you unpack that for us and kind of walk us through your way you deal with these things with
Yeah.
others?
Yeah. So when I was struggling with my eating disorder, I heard something at some point that was kind of the beginning of the end of that for me. And
Hmm.
it was a speaker I was listening to, a conference talk that I was listening to, and the person said, every one of us is sitting in the middle of perfect mental health. We at our essence, at our core, we are have everything we could ever possibly want and need. And we're constantly thinking. There is
Mm-hmm.
a role of thought just constantly playing, right? And this isn't necessarily what they said, but this is what I heard in this is that the only thing going on is when we get identified with that thought, we're run around because everybody knows our thinking is crazy. I mean, it really is. There's no way about it. That doesn't mean any, it's not
Yeah.
personal. It doesn't mean anything about any of us. Thought goes all over the place and it's
Right.
inconsistent. It contradicts itself and it's just busy and it's just how a mind works. And when we're identified with that train of thought, life's going to be messy and a roller coaster and we're going to be all over the place. But when we start to see, oh yeah, there's a mind always talking in here, but I'm not that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
beyond that. All is well. I don't have habits. I don't have issues. I'm okay here beyond all that thinking. That's a game changer. So
Mm.
for me personally, even at that time, I started to see, oh, so when I get a little uncomfortable and my mind starts screaming at me to restrict food or binge on food or whatever it might be, that's just the machinery. Like
Right.
that's just a brain that's doing what it was conditioned to do. You know,
Right.
it's doing what it thinks it needs to do to help us. And really starting to see that as the machinery. That's just how I say it now. But what that did for me, I think at the time, was like all of a sudden, like, oh, this isn't personal. This
Mm-hmm.
isn't about me being a weak person. This
Right.
isn't about food, which I knew it never was. This isn't about any of those details. It has nothing to do with me, and it has nothing to do with my surroundings or
Mm-hmm.
that I just moved and there are stressors in my life. Like, no, come on. We all have stressors all the time. It wasn't that. It was deeper. It was just that my mind was doing, what it routinely, habitually did, and I was identified with that. And
Right.
that took so much pressure off. It was like
Yeah.
it was, you know what I mean? When it wasn't personal and it wasn't a
Right.
flaw about me, it was like, oh, now I can just look at this. So it's
Yeah.
a long answer, I know, but it kind of points to I saw that in my eating issues. And then I started to see, well, eating issues, again, those are that's just the detail. This is the same when my mind was freaking out and having a panic attack,
Yeah.
or when someone else's mind is shutting down and they're experiencing depression, or whatever it might be. It's a mind doing what it thinks it needs to do to keep us okay. And the only problem is we're very identified with it.
Right. I do have a saying too that I say, we are not the problem. It's really the way the brain's designed, like the way that the brain operates, like you said, the machinery. So a lot of our thinking, beliefs, habits, our identity gets wrapped up. We believe we are certain things when we can step out of that identity and step in, see ourselves from a different perspective in a second,
Yeah.
and free ourselves. That's so cool. So, uh, when you're working with someone, like, for example, with anxiety, because I think that's something that a lot of people have actually elevated anxiety during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, struggling with that, struggling with habits that maybe came up during the pandemic, and not just around food, but just also just bad habits, drinking. Uh, we're in California here, smoking more weed than usual. Just to manage feelings and emotions. Like when people are looking for an answer for that, and they're saying, "I'm anxious," right? What would you how would you blow the cap off of that,
Yeah.
idea?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really huge thing to kind of explore our experience in that way. And I think ultimately, now I'll say this, and I wouldn't, this isn't just take care of it. It's for each of us to kind of deeply explore this and see it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But when there are times of uncertainty or times of stress or whatever, and our mind is just running hot, basically, that's what we call anxiety. Yes, the mind is all over the place. It's wondering what might happen. It's imagining bad things. We feel it physically, we feel it emotionally. that those feelings aren't liked by the mind. So the mind will then say, well, let me smoke this or drink this or eat this, and then that'll make it feel better. And again, it's all this big ball of psychology. I mean, it's really just all
Hmm.
a big ball of thought and feeling that isn't like, even in itself, that's not a problem. Like
Hmm.
it's a, it's like a dog chasing its tail. It's just like all wound up. Now, the problem, yeah, is like when we're in this experience and we're thinking it's about us or it's about our life, even that it's about our life. Like, I'll be okay
Hmm.
when the pandemic ends, or this needs to happen for me to be okay. I mean, I think we all have like a lifetime of examples of the fact that that's not true, and it's never going to be true. It's never
Right.
ever that something out there needs to change and then we'll feel better.
Right.
Just isn't. So the more we kind of get in that exploration of like, no, you're actually fine.
Hmm.
You and what you truly are is peace, love, energy, oneness with all things. There's no problem. There's just a psychology that's a little ramped up. And it's pinning its ramped upness on all these things in your life. But the more we sort of just people come to really insightfully see, oh, that's what that is, it's amazing what happens.
Mm.
You can fully feel that anxiety, but deeply know, okay, this is just my mind doing what it thinks it needs to do. And that changes everything.
Yeah, that's it. That's so great to really look at it from that perspective. It kind of you can see that sort of interior structure start to melt
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Now, you have written a book because I know you work with people in different ways. You've written a book about all of this, right? Your approach to making changes. It's tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've written a few actually. So my book, The Little Book of Big Change, is probably the one you're thinking of, and that's specifically around habits, anxiety as well, but just kind of talks through how this looks. When
Hmm.
how change happens as people wake up to the fact that thought is there, or that they're thinking,
Mm.
without having to dive into the what you're thinking. And sometimes, of course, sometimes we want to look at what we're thinking, and that's helpful for us. But I think this way of seeing things goes a little deeper, where it's like we could chase thoughts around all day and try to nail them down and think different thoughts and reframe them and see how they're untrue. And again, that has some helpfulness at times. In my experience, it was a full-time job, and it always, and it always felt like, what am I even doing here? Because we kind of know we're not even aware of probably most of what's running. So to
Right.
kind of find what you're consciously aware of and then do a bunch of work on it just seemed like it could never end, and it wasn't getting me very far anyway. So it's more again about seeing like you're habit free by nature, you're anxiety free by nature, and all experience is safe. Thought arises, intrusive thoughts arise, habitual thoughts arise, habit related thoughts arise, cravings for smoking and drinking and all the things arise, and that experience is not you. That is
Mm.
energy that shows up, it comes and it goes completely on its own. We
Yeah.
don't need to manage our experience. And I think that's a huge part of this, for me it was with anxiety and with habits, is that when this stuff would arise and it would feel really uncomfortable, instantly our mind kicks in and says, what do I do? How do I make it
Hmm.
go away? But truly, like when we come to just be in this place where we know it's not us and it's all safe and it's self-correcting, there's nothing we have to step in and do. We start to see it come and go a lot more quickly and easily on its
Right. Right. So we're sort of, and we become able to not necessarily, would you say master the thoughts or just be more not run by them, but be able to see them for what they are?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to master, but
Hmm.
we just not, they just look more like the shadow on the wall.
Hmm.
But they truly are. Like there's nothing to do, because it's just a thought. It's only when we're super identified with it that we think it means something and we think it's personal. That's where we'll step in and try to master it or chase it away or do something with it.
Right, right,
It's
right.
more a position of like, okay, this is just what's showing up right now.
That's that's great. Well, thank you for that insight. Now, are I know your Amy is offering everybody the first two chapters of her book for free. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, which is very generous. And hopefully that it will be the open a door for all of you if you are, suffering right now from intrusive thoughts or anxiety. I know, like I said, a lot of people are. Uh, I appreciate your coming on this show today and opening up this door in this way of looking into things. Is there any last minute thoughts or any thoughts about like the first steps forward for somebody if they're really stuck in one place?
Um, yeah, I would just say, feeling stuck is thought and feeling too, and it's
Mm.
normal and everybody feels stuck at some point. But if anything you've heard resonates, even if your mind can't make sense of this, but if it resonates on some level that you are peace, you are health, everything is well, and there's just this flow of thinking and feeling that move through that you don't need to do anything about. That's awesome. Notice that. Just watch it come and go completely on its own, and that will start to separate you from it and just make for a completely different experience.
Wow. Thank you, Amy. It's been so great to have you on the Thin Thinking podcast. I really appreciate your coming today.
Thanks, Rita. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dr. Amy, for being here. And please, everyone, take advantage of the links to the downloads of the first two chapters of her book, The Little Book of Big Change, and also the other book, Just a Thought. They're both in the show notes, along with the place to ask me any question. Please ask away. All right, everyone, have an amazing week. And remember that the key, and probably the only key to unlock the door of the weight struggle, is inside you. So keep listening and find it. Do you want to dive deeper into the mindset of long-term weight release? Head on over to www.shiftweightmastery.com. That's www.shiftweightmastery.com, where you'll find numerous tools and resources to help you unlock your mind for permanent weight release, tips, strategies, and more. And be sure to check the show notes to learn more about my book, From Fat to Thin Thinking: Unlock Your Mind for Permanent Weight Loss.